So, within this last quarter, we doubled our MRR, right? And deal after deal closed. My efficiency at selling, I handle most of the sales. That increased tenfold. And we have 100% conversion rate after strategy into a monthly agreement.
Welcome to another episode of the Smart Agency Masterclass, a podcast for the agency owner that wants to hear amazing stories from the best agency owners in the world. And on today's episode, I have one of my good friends, Derrick. He's going to talk about chasing the pot of gold, but stepping over diamonds and not realizing he stepped over diamonds. Well, he did later on. And we're going to talk about how you can avoid really being set on one thing and missing that huge opportunity. So let's go ahead and jump into the show. Hey, Derrick, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jason.
Yeah,
Thanks
man.
for having me.
Well, tell us who you are and what do you do?
I'm Derrick Kuhn. I own a full-service digital marketing agency. We are based out of Colorado, Fort Collins, Colorado, great city. And I've had a number of companies over the years. It's a total of 11 right now. And through the, leveraging all of that past business experience into the best of breed from business consulting combined with a true digital marketing strategy, only on what works and high leverage. That's what we do.
That's awesome. And so how did you, you've had a lot of businesses and sold businesses and stuff in the past. How did you get into owning a digital agency?
Oh, man. And that's a funny story. So I always wanted to be an entrepreneur ever since I was a kid. Reason being, my dad was a mega success in the corporate world. He was a partner at Deloitte. We moved 11 times before I graduated high school, so 11 different states. Although we were in the top 1% of income, I saw how absolutely devastating that was. At least it was for me personally. Just new friends every other year. Right, I had to start middle school twice. One was middle school, one was junior high. So I was the new kid in the worst. That's the worst thing. So what that generated in me is a absolute passion to be an entrepreneur. And I wanted to call my own shots, choose my suffering instead of have it inflicted on me from others. So in college, I was about to graduate, and a couple of these guys were genius programmers but had no clue how to run a business. And I still remember it. They had like 100,000 in uncollected AR, and I collected most of it within a week. And they just wrote me a check on this little personal check, no taxes, no withholding. And that launched it. In fact, I had been kind of against technology. I really didn't like computers at that point. And so it was the drive to be an entrepreneur combined with the first opportunity that showed up, and I pounced.
You were like the Rocky of going, I'm going to collect.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, it was the enforcer for sure. And what was interesting though, Jason, is I called up and asked them. That's what I did. That was all it took. So it didn't take massive business skill. It just took some action.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about kind of the opportunity that I see a lot of agency owners fall into the trap where we're so focused on an end goal that we have our blinders on to, opportunity. So I guess tell us a little bit about that story. What happened?
Yeah. So, I like to say, be careful about getting overly focused on a specific outcome versus the larger picture. And like the example is, people put horse blinders on and they will step over $1 million opportunity because they can't see anything but that $100,000 one. And that's happened to me numerous times. Half my businesses have been learning experiences, right, versus successes. And I've learned this lesson repeatedly. And in fact, I did discover the mechanism in the brain that's called the RAS. It's the reticular activating system. And it's the gateway between the conscious and the unconscious mind. And it is what is allowed up from your environment into conscious awareness. So an example of that is if you buy a new car, you see that new car everywhere. Buy a new shirt, same thing. So there is, and it doesn't take any effort. It's like a pre-wired filter, and most people develop it completely unconsciously, just based on what happens to them throughout life. And so this became, in our space in the digital world, the opportunities are infinite. It's not just say like this one tool is the only thing or this one lane is the only thing, because it's constantly changing and you could step right over these. But the other side of that is you're chasing 1,000 things at once. So a good example of that is my last agency before this one, we grew it to 82 FTEs and hyper successful. We landed the largest healthcare system in Colorado, based in Colorado, UC Health. And we did all their digital marketing for 5 years, rebuilt their website. I had to interview all 5 CEOs. I knew what was funny about that is none of them actually said the same thing, which I thought was hilarious. But what came out of that was a true depth of experience and expertise within the healthcare space. But instead of pivoting and then niching down into that space, which is very profitable, high demand, high need, and they also love technology. I mean, these guys are not against it, by and large, at least. So instead of this was a pot of gold right in front of me, and I didn't recognize the level of opportunity that I had and parlay that into other healthcare systems. There are many, many of them all across the US, and they're monsters. And they really value the expertise within their area of focus, right? It does matter to them deeply that you know what you're talking about. So UC Health eventually in-housed a lot of their stuff. And I had 2 business partners, had some disagreements with them. And when I spun off onto my own agency, the one I have now, in that chaos, I didn't focus on that opportunity and cast a broad net, just sort of survive and get deals in. And, looking back, was a massive wasted opportunity, massive.
Let's dive a little bit deeper into that. Why do you think that you were trying to cast a wider net, especially working with the monster client?
Yep.
What was distracting you from that?
Yeah. So I would say, in the majority of my businesses, I've always had business partners. This was the second time I was solo in a company, and it was fear. The answer in one word was fear, and fear makes you do crazy things, right? And so instead of a thoughtful, deliberate, here's what I'm going to do in spite of the risks, right? Because immediate cash flow is super important based on the circumstances. I took a whole team with me, and that would have required the lag time there would have been very dangerous in my mind. Like in retrospect, it absolutely was no different than just chasing every deal in the world. But then once I had all these other deals going, I was now back on my heels, and sort of the mode of operation became, say yes to everything and figure it out. And then one day we'll specialize. And then 5 years goes by.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I totally get that. I've seen it happen. It's happened to me. It's kind of when things are right in front of you, it's hard to kind of see it. So let's talk about this, the story you were telling me a little while ago about doubling your monthly recurring revenue, which is great, right? And how are you able to see this opportunity? Because you were chasing something additional in the far distance, but saw kind of the diamonds. You were chasing the gold, you saw the diamonds.
Yep.
How were you aware that it was diamonds and to take your focus off?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, within this last quarter, we doubled our MRR, right? And it really it was again a little bit it wasn't fear this time, but it was pain. And pain is a great lever if you properly apply the learning. And you were a huge part of this, Jason, in one of our group meetings. I was explaining to the group that I had lost this giant client. It would have been the biggest one we've had to date in the last 5 years, almost UC Health level opportunity. And what we had been working on and what I had decided after analyzing the best way to engage is we have to put them through we call it the Apex strategy process, which is, sets expectations, allows us to do deep research, map out ROI. And so that had been working. And then I got overly excited, thought I had this one, and skipped that step and went straight for the close and the big contract. And didn't get it. And so it was like a flash of lightning when you were asking me a series of questions in front of the group. And then I realized I had skipped over that step. And at that moment, the RAS snapped into place. Everything was going to be focused around every sale process, every bit of marketing was all going to be funneling them towards this Apex strategy. And if they didn't want it, too bad. They just refer them to somebody else. And as that deal after deal closed, my efficiency at selling, I handle most of the sales. That increased tenfold. And we have 100% conversion rate after strategy into a monthly agreement. And the majority of those are now, they all have escalations in them that the client's fully aware of. So we're set again. I think we can double again this quarter, in partly because of the success of the first one and what's baked in, but also we're gaining more and more credibility, all of that. So yeah, that it was a pain of loss with good direction, which I owe you quite a bit. So for that.
Well, you executed well. It's all about figuring out. I always tell everybody, look, at the lowest points are when you need to kind of take a step back and not make quick decisions. I think that's where people mess up. And I was telling you before the interview, I'm going through getting my pilot's license. And one of the things they say is when an emergency happens, you don't need to be like, fix it right away. You need to take a moment. You need to kind of digest it and then assess and then come up with a plan in order to go execute. So you don't die. I mean, the consequences of flying is a little more dangerous than running a business, but the same principles apply. Like your business survives or it doesn't, thrives or goes down, right? It's all about kind of the same principles. And I'm glad you were able to do that. Tell us a little bit more about, was there was fear on the first one. Was there fear on this one because there was more, was there more fear to execute on this one? Like, I'm just trying to think, what was the difference between the two?
Yeah. I actually think you just summarized it really well in that stepping back and applying. I heard one business thought leader, he calls it thinking time. And that's where you step back, you don't interact with anyone, and you let that panicked mind settle down. And you work through, and then when you get to that decision, you just got to have the courage to hold the course. And that, after losing that deal, if I did not have that conversation with you and snap all of that into focus, I mean, that was the keystone mental shift for me, right? But then we have a great process for this. It just was one of those things that, I wasn't absolutely committed to in terms of pushing people into that kind of agreement or encouraging them. Pushing is probably the wrong word. So yeah, the big difference, the fear is still there. I mean, I think fear is great. I think it gets a bad rap, but you have to use it correctly, right? You need to harness stress, not manage stress. Same thing with fear.
Yeah, and also too, I think you realized in the sales process, when you push on someone, what happens? They're going to push back.
Yeah.
Right? But if you can kind of pull them, they're going to lean in. Or if you talk a little bit softer, they're going to be like, what? And that's the whole idea around that offering ladder that you guys started doing in the foot in the door. I'm just glad it worked And I can't wait to see it double and triple and quadruple and all that going forward. Derrick, is there anything I did not ask you in this episode that you think would help out the listeners listening in?
I think I would tag one thing on to what you said. Part of the strategy is asking a lot of questions, right? And then follow-up questions till you understand. And there's a book I read called Honest Signals, and they had a great study out of Harvard where they had three different scenarios that they studied, and it was like getting a raise, getting hired, and raising venture capital funds. And they analyzed all of the possible variables of who won and who didn't, and they would actually switch people out. So it turned out it wasn't scenario specific. And the one factor that was the most tied to success was if the interviewer spent more time talking than the interviewee. So asking questions and listening has verifiable science behind the fact that the more they talk, the more likely they are to buy. But it can't just be basic questions. They also went into saying there needs to be insightful follow-up questions. And strategies built to do that. And so I think that would be really helpful because we get excited about what we're true believers here, and it's tough to rein that in. And listening is very, very powerful.
Well, you brought up a good point because a lot of us, we will chat with a prospect and immediately we know the solution. We know the prescription that they need to do. But if they say like one sentence and we're like, oh, we diagnosed it, we give you the answer. They're not going to believe it. But if you constantly ask them more detailed questions, well, tell me more about that. Okay, yeah, okay. Well, and then you start off the end like this. Well, based on everything you told me, I believe we should do X, Y, and Z. Do you agree? Do you have any questions? And they were like, oh, okay, right? You're coming from a sense of authority versus knowing it right away. And I always struggled with this. I had to throttle myself back. Even though I knew the prescription, I had to go through the process. And when you break the process, you break the answer. You break the win most of the time.
Yeah. Another study that relates is if a waiter repeats back the order, just verbatim, nothing fancy, raises the average tip 18%. So simply the fact of repeating back instead of jumping to here's what you need to do. And I find when you do that, when you repeat it back, even if you're just doing it because you want to go tell them what the prescription is, it does tend to open the mind. And maybe that's that RAS system again. It opens the mind to more thoughtful questions, which often illuminate something very interesting. The best brain surgeon in the world, the absolute best, has the wrong diagnosis and does the wrong procedure. It doesn't matter how good he is. It's not going to work. So diagnosing can only be done through questions and listening.
Yeah, it's great advice. Well, this has all been amazing, Derrick. What's the agency website people can go and check you out?
It's Brillity Digital, and that's BRILLITY, and then digital.com. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and all the fun places as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Derrick, for coming on the show and giving us your time. And if you guys enjoyed the episode and you want to get access to our free masterclasses that we're constantly putting out, we just launched our Attract Masterclass where it shows you how to get your perfect clients and get them actually calling you and how you can position your agency so you don't look like everyone else. Make sure you go to youtube.com/Jason Swenk. Make sure you subscribe and you'll see the Attract Masterclass. We're about to put up the Convert Masterclass, depending on when you guys are listening to this, and all other kinds of amazing resources we're putting out for free, for nothing. Like, it doesn't cost you anything, but we're giving away all our best stuff. So make sure you go there now. And until next time, have a swank day.